Welcome to Wellness is a Way of Life, the podcast for female leaders seeking sustainable energy, clarity, and confidence. I'm Megan Swan, your guide on a journey to mastering wellness as an integrated part of your life. Let's explore personalized wellness strategies that truly resonate with who you are. Welcome, Danielle Graham, to the podcast. I'm so excited for this interview. We're going to have a super powerful conversation. Danielle is just a powerhouse and a complete connector. I recently had the honor of meeting her in real life at Elevate in Toronto. We'll talk about that as well. She founded the first women-focused tech accelerator, fierce founder in Canada. She is also a founding member of the Firehood, an angel group that I'm honored to be a member of, and we'll talk about that as well. I'll let her talk about how she got involved in all of this, and we'll ask her what lights her up. Welcome, Danielle. How are you this morning? Let's do a quick check-in.
Thank you, Megan. Nice and jet-lagged, as I mentioned, flying in from Dubai, but that's all part of the aura and the mystery of what we do that we're going to dig into today. So, no, I've really had such a lucky time of my career, starting with Fierce Founders, found my passion really early by creating that program, and just became totally addicted to the tech ecosystem and supporting women entrepreneurs. And so from boot camps to hackathons to early stage accelerators to early stage funds to full blown venture capital funds, and now with Firehood itself, and connecting both sides, right? It's a double-sided marketplace, both the angels that you've experienced and the founders, to say, how can we all work together at the stages where it's the most subjective to bring more perspective and diverse perspectives. And this is such a homogeneous ecosystem. So we need to change it in order to change what happens at the later stages. So as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this. And I think we're doing some good work that I'm happy to share any and all details with you.
Yeah, well, I'd love to know a little bit more of the catalyst, the story behind you and Claudette deciding, like, we need to do this, how you started and what you decided, sort of what was the mission of the Firehood, and, how did you draw people in initially? I'm guessing it wasn't too hard because it's just this addictive energy to get involved with all these amazing women doing and building amazing things.
Yeah, the founding story of the Firehood. Well, it happened during COVID, but we were lucky enough to know each other quite well before that. So we had been part of a number of other initiatives. We were kind of working in parallel in a lot of ways, where when I was building the first women-focused tech accelerator, she was building the first Black Arts and Innovation Expo, I think a few months before I started. And so we were working on those separately, but then came together for the Black Innovation Fellowship, as well as numerous initiatives like Move the Dial, which shut down during COVID. And we felt like there was a massive gap in the ecosystem where there wasn't that focus on intersectionality. It's not just about women, but it's about diverse women from different countries, from different backgrounds, who relate to each other, and the leadership that can come from that representation. And so as someone who grew up in international schools and, was part of the International Diplomatic Corps, I grew up with people who always had different perspectives. So that really motivated me to see if we could make Canada that multicultural, women-focused country that it's so well marketed for, but at the same time, I haven't experienced, unfortunately. And so trying to get Canada to the place where we wanted it to be. And so we were chatting a lot during COVID, and we just didn't see what we wanted to see in the ecosystem existing. And so we knew we were going to build a fund when I was watching Hunger Games and came up with the name Phoenix Fire. I was like, what's Mockingjay? That's totally like Phoenix. And so I called her immediately, and she was like, yes, and I'll buy in. And I'm like, no, we need to build this together. And I just stuck with that until I was won over. And then we just started building from there. And Phoenix Fire is the fund, but Firehood came from the concept of sisterhood. And we knew we wanted to build this network And then once we had that and it didn't exist already, we just kept fueling ideas into it. And we have so many. We're both ideators. So continuously, building on these ideas, building on the strategy, implementing different parts of that strategy earlier on by having the women who put their money where their mouth is, right? By starting with a venture capital fund with major commitments. And in that process, we spoke to over 1,000 women, and so many, I think we're very similar to you, where they're like, well, I want to be engaged. I want to be involved. I want to advise and support and learn and be part of a community, right? You don't want to just put your capital into a fund and see it grow. You want to exist in that world. You want to get to know the founders. You want to analyze and determine for yourself where your money goes. And so seeing that major gap was why we created the Angel Network. And I think it's so much more than an angel network, because it's not about just meeting once a month and finding a deal and putting your capital behind it. It's having that fulsome experience, meeting hundreds of companies and learning how to benchmark for yourself. If it's not a vehement yes, it's a no from an investment standpoint. That's your hard-earned capital. And so where do you want to put your time, your money, and your energy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we agree that it's, you need to be the change you want to see in the world, but you also need to fund the change that you want to see in the world. And, just a little bit of background for people that aren't maybe, aware of exactly what angel investing is. This is something you need to educate yourself on, understand it is high risk. But I think what so many women don't understand is, what it can look like, and that you don't necessarily need to be a multi-millionaire to get involved. In fact, it's so much more powerful when we have more women behind these female founders, not just the capital, but like you said, with their expertise, their networks, their know-how in different minute aspects of how this founder now needs to scale.
Exactly. And so going through that process like you did with the Elevate Women Plus program, where you're learning from venture capitalists, where you're learning alongside founders. And a lot of it is parallel, right? So the core elements around term sheets, around valuations, around due diligence processes, all of those things are knowable within a certain amount of time. And then you can build on that your own level of skill, right? So how involved do you want to be? There's a wide range of qualifications around due diligence and legal terms, but maybe you want to outsource some of that, right? A lawyer is always going to be more professional on the legal terms, but you at least have a general sense of, okay, I'm comfortable within this range. So it's about your own confidence and your own comfort level to get past those early stages and not just see maybe the first deal, she charms you and then you're like, okay, here's my money. You want to be able to source a lot of deals and find that right fit. So for me, yes, there's the core educational pieces, but it's more about that matchmaking on an ongoing basis to say, how do you qualify and determine a good deal? And that's your perspective too, right?
Yeah. And I love how, one thing I've learned is you really have to look at this relationship as a marriage of sorts, because you're going to be spending probably 10 years or, a good amount of time. And, that it's a process of shopping, if you will, as much as it is for the founder with the investor as the investor with the founder. It just needs to be a good match. I'd love if you could talk, because I think so many women start hearing these terms and they're like, I'm so out of water. Like, I don't know. And I personally believe that it's very strategic in our current system that we are supposed to feel like we don't know what we're talking about when it comes to legal and financial unless we've been professionally trained.
That's a great point, and it's unfortunate, right? And so we can always educate ourselves. And the terms that exist, we do a lot of presentations. Happy to do another one and actually dig in, maybe, do a proper deep dive on terminology and comfort level around angel investing. I would say at a high level, you've got terms like SAFE, which is simple agreement for future equity. You've got convertible notes and you've got equity rounds. And so everything is driving towards that valuation. How much of the company are you buying with the amount that you're giving? And you'll hear these terms on Dragon's Den or Shark Tank where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to give you, 10% for 100K. Well, then you can calculate the amount of that company is worth. So we don't say it like that in the real world. We say your valuation, say 5 million, which isn't a real number in terms of how much your company is currently worth. It's about agreeing to a certain amount of dilution for the company to benefit as founders long term by continuing to work hard and build their company. And the investors who are earlier have an incentive to invest now versus later, which is why it gets tricky with angel investing, where we have to be those first investors, take the most risk for a little amount of money. But when a company is raising 10 million and you're trying to offer them a 10, 25K check, well, that's not as valuable to them then. So you're willing to take that risk earlier, which means you get more potential upside later on because the company's value is lower. But the value really only comes to fruition when it's bought.
Right.
And so everything else is so hypothetical. So you have to be comfortable with that discomfort. And you have to believe in the person. You have to believe in the potential of the company. You have to have the foresight to see opportunity before others. That's what you're benefiting from as an investor.
Yes. I'd love if you talk a little bit of how you are currently feeling about the Firehood and even sort of the evolution that you've told me before of, your participation in Elevate from 3 years ago to now, like how dramatically different it is. And I know a lot of the angels that have been in the group for since its initiation, we're saying like the quality and just it was just so exciting, those 51-minute pitches we got to hear on Tuesday, and it's just dramatically different as it evolves. I'd love for you to speak to that.
Yeah, and what's nice for me is it's been an evolution since Fierce Founders, so a decade of this work where in the beginning, people didn't even believe that there were that many female founders out there. They're like, oh, women aren't building these companies, they're risk adverse, they're having families. That's what I was hearing. And I was like, I was very diplomatic in my responses to that. Even at a young age, I was just like, okay, well, we don't know what the factors are, but let's do something to work towards change. And people could buy into that. And we're like, okay, let's start there. So here's a boot camp, here's a 25K prize. And I would literally go out to every tech event I could and talk to all the women and say, hey, do you even have an idea? Like, what are you building? Who do you know? Do you want to be part of this ecosystem? So people with ideas were coming, and I would get like 100 applications just with that. And that was a good start because then at least we knew who was out there, who was interested. We could funnel them into different places to get them the right support. But not even knowing who they were out there or no one being proactive in that recruitment was a big first step. Now we're getting 500 plus applications for each cohort. And what's incredible about that is it's not just about the applications, it's also about the introductions, the other investors, people who know what we're all about and are saying, this is a great program, this really helped me. Other founders are making intros, other investors are making intros, and those intros, when they're curated, are some of the highest potential. So it's about having this massive funnel where we can say, okay, great, now we can have higher and higher quality investments. And so with last year and the year before, people didn't, number one, we launched, people didn't even know about the Firehood. And I remember so many people apologizing to me for that. They're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'm like, it's okay. It didn't exist. I just made it up. I have no, we're very humble, like we don't expect you to know it. We just started. But I think even at that point, it looked like something that had already been a key component of the ecosystem because it was so needed that it was like, how did this not exist? And then the next year doing a bit of a call out and having some time to recruit founders ahead of time. But it was more like, I would say 300 applications, and a lot of them were earlier stage and they didn't know even the basis of what is an investment strategy. While as this time it was competitive, they knew about it, they came prepared. We had to say no to some really high quality founders that, I still stay in touch with because they're our pipeline for the next one, right? Maybe they're just 3-6 months off being ready, but the qualifications are there. They just need to be investment ready, right? And that I think you could see in terms of a lot of the companies that weren't necessarily selected for investment. it wasn't that the founder wasn't great or the idea wasn't great or the potential wasn't there. It was just maybe next time, right? Let's see what traction you get. It's a little too risky. So then they have to take it upon themselves to de-risk, and you'll put your capital behind them when you feel confident.
Yeah. And so what sorts of things are you looking into for the future of the Firehood? And if someone wants to get involved, what do they need to know about investing or investing specifically with the Firehood network?
Great question. So we have our kind of usual calendar of events. So the next one is SAS North in Ottawa. Then we're going to do a big event on International Women's Day. So stay tuned for where and how that will come to fruition, because I think it's definitely going to be bigger and better than ever. And then we're going to do Uniting the Prairies, Web Summit in Vancouver, Atlantic Venture Forum, Startup Fest. And so that's kind of what's in store in terms of the key events and when we have these moments. But we also have every month. So our Firehood event next month is at Google. We're going to work more collaboratively with conferences, incubators, and corporates to incorporate what they're doing and support the deal flow that we're working with. And then, there was a reason I was in Dubai, right? We want to be more international. We want to be able to support our founders beyond these borders. So we are very Canadian, homegrown, but we also know that there's a big world out there, and we want to help our founders explore it in more strategic and fast-paced ways.
One thing that a lot of founders, we want them to feel empowered to reach beyond the US as like the apex market. It's like, no, like let's think global. US is great and powerful, but yeah, and I think so many of the projects that were pitched are clearly global initiatives. So very exciting.
Yeah, we've got Middle East and Africa, Europe. Singapore is now the gateway to East Asia. So thinking about what that could look like on a more consistent basis for all of our portfolio companies versus the one-off work that has to happen for each company. So I think by having broader strategic partnerships, similar to the way that we've run things in Canada, we can apply that model more globally. And then maybe you want to come to on the next trip too.
Crossing my fingers that works out. And let's just wrap up. Like, you are the ultimate dot connector. How have you established such an incredible network? Literally every single person I mentioned, they asked, what are you doing in Toronto? And I feel like even when I wasn't at the Elevate conference, they're like, oh yeah, I know Danielle Graham. I was like, how does this woman know so many people?
Just, my blood is made of coffee, and I'm just constantly, going to every coffee date. I spent my early career in Waterloo, and so I think that created a strong foundation and a strong community, and I was people's go-to person in Waterloo. So even when I wasn't in Toronto, I was still networking and supporting so much of the Toronto ecosystem that when I did move here to work for OCI as market readiness fund manager, it felt like the entire ecosystem embraced me with open arms, and I was on like every panel and I was speaking, and I was still such a nervous speaker at the time, but I got better because it was thrust upon me. I wasn't reaching for it. And I think it was because I was authentically just trying to build behind the scenes that I was forced in front of the scenes. And then I adjusted to that too. So I think I'm really adaptable. I'm very mission driven and problem solving. And so that just leads to, I think, a lot of really authentic connections. And then people want to open up doors. And hopefully those are doors that I can then pull a bunch of founders through.
Yeah. And I'll just add, like, your passion around this is just magnetic. So I think anyone that has the privilege of talking to you about this just kind of gets drawn in. So what's the best way for people to connect with the Firehood?
Reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or through our website. We've actually had a lot of people reach out to become angels directly through the website, and we want to get to know everyone. It's a close-knit network, and it's not just about the capital. It's about who are the people behind that capital, and what is their hope for the founders, right? We want people to have good intentions and support these companies with the fuel they need to grow and succeed and offer that value. And so I think we can curate a lot of that by meeting with individuals. So just reach out on the website and we'll spend some time with them.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that you have a level to get involved so you can just sort of be a part of the community and observe, and, then feel more comfortable if it's absolutely brand new to you. And I can just say that the moment you enter these rooms and get involved, it's pretty addictive and hard not to get more deeply involved.
Thank you, Megan. Well, we've got to do more in your ecosystem too, out in Alberta, right? Because
yes, please.
and we've got some plans, and I've got some strong Alberta roots too. So I think that there's so many important communities within Canada, and we've certainly found a lot of technical companies that are gems in the region that we've invested in. So I think there's more to dig up if I'm going to keep that analogy going.
Amazing. Any last bits of wisdom for women looking to get involved in angel investing?
I really liked what you said around it's actually possible to do it sooner than you think. I think people create an idea or concept around angel investing for like really, really rich multimillionaires. And, oh, I'm not ready. I have to get through these hurdles before I can get there. It's like, no, do what you want now. Be involved where you want to be involved. Learn what you want to learn. You don't have to have as many qualifications. People think about accredited angel. Accreditation just means that you have the bare minimum of a 200K salary or 300K with your partner or $1 million in liquid assets. So that's what it means to be accredited. But there's more deregulation around, do you have the specialization and the skills? It's just helping you de-risk so that you understand you're taking a risk by making these investments. But if you're not participating on cap tables, and currently women are very low numbers, both as founders and as angels in the single digits, we're not participating in that entire wealth creation experience of the world. So starting sooner, there's a great book by Jason Calacanis, Turning 100K into 100 million as an angel. And it starts with advisory. So I'm happy to have those conversations really early on with people and encourage them to learn and build. And we've even had some people who by all means should be accredited and they just weren't negotiating effectively. So let's take those steps and fill those gaps. And we're really willing to work with the ecosystem and where those gaps exist to educate.
Beautiful. It's a perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your inspiration. And, we'll be in touch. Thanks for tuning in to Wellness is a Way of Life. Are you ready to make wellness a natural part of your routine? Let's stay connected. Go to meganswanwellness.com. Until next time, live well and thrive.